topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Hi, and welcome to Learning to Dance in the Rain. This is Shelby Wagner and Pastor Carl Litchfield from Mendon Church, Methodist Church, and from the Borough Methodist Church. Welcome, Carl. How are you today?
I'm fine, Shelby. Thank you for inviting me once again.
Hey, I look forward to this chat every first Tuesday of the month, and I'm glad that you are
able time to be together. Yep.
Yes. I just want to tell the audience, remind them that I am the author of Learning to Dance in the Rain, Surviving Grief, Internet Dating, Romance Scams, and the book Scams, and the host of your show, Learning to Dance in the Rain, where we discuss different difficult issues that we might face in our lives. And today, we're going to be talking about fear and what God's word has to say about helping us to manage that fear.
Right.
So with that, I guess that's a good, if you in the audience have any questions or comments that you would like to add, then I give you the number 561-623-9429. And you're welcome to call, and we'll see if we can answer those questions for you. So Carl.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us today. And we were going to start, I believe, with can you share a personal time when you maybe were afraid or something, or when an experience that significantly impacted your faith?
Yeah. Well, I think all of us experience fear. I don't think if we're humans at all, if a human being of any kind, somewhere, someplace along the way, we are going to experience fear. The question is how much, how often does it come to us? And more importantly, and most importantly, would be how do we handle fear when it comes? And I would tell that in Vacation Bible School, I shared this, I think, for like 5 or 6 years of my teaching. They were often asking me to be the storyteller, and 5 or 6 years in along the way in my teaching, we would touch on the experience of fear. And my own experience has been something like this. And I experience fear most frequently, and I can't even say frequently is the right word, because it's a pretty rare occasion, but the setting that I experience fear happens to be when I have a nightmare. If I'm sound asleep, these things only happen maybe 2, maybe 3 times a year. But what happens, and I can't tell you exactly, I don't remember my dreams very well. I only know that I wake up and I'm very frightened. And how do I know I'm frightened? Well, first of all, I can't catch my breath. I'm panting. And that's what that reaction to fear brings on. And what I've discovered is, for me, the way to handle that fear is to turn instantly to my Savior Jesus and ask Jesus to help me with the fear. And oftentimes I cannot articulate a prayer. I'm too frozen with that fear. I'm not even thinking. But the one thing I can do is I can say the name of Jesus. Jesus, 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 until that fear subsides. And I was telling the children, anytime you're afraid, just ask Jesus or just say Jesus' name until you can turn it into a prayer. Jesus, help me. Jesus, help me. Jesus, please take this fear away. Jesus, please calm my heart. That's been my experience. Now, it says a personal experience where fear significantly impacted your spiritual journey. One in particular happened at a time when I was wrestling with my call into ministry. And I had a fear, a couple of different fears about becoming a pastor and what would that be like to have the responsibility of a whole clergy career of speaking to God's people, counseling them, the responsibility of caring for them in a spiritual way. And one thing I was afraid of when I began was that I had not lived well enough. I had not lived long enough. And I was afraid that I lacked lifetime experience to be able to speak authoritatively to people, many of whom were at that time in that stage of my career would be much older than I, much more experienced. Who am I to tell them what to do? Or who am I to advise them about what is important? So I was afraid I didn't have the life experiences that it would take to be able to preach well to congregations. I was afraid I didn't have enough sermon illustrations based on my life experience. I thought, what are you ever going to say? What have you ever going to say? What I've discovered is I didn't have to worry about what I had to offer, because the riches that are found in God's word, all you had to do is go study the scriptures for it that you've selected or are challenged with it. You know that this is what you need to be preaching to your people. I'm telling you, everything you need to say is found in the context of those scriptures. I really haven't run out of anything to say yet so far after 41 years in ministry and continuing on. Now, the second thing was an overall fear that I had. Would that be somehow, some way? I was not really called to ministry. I had misinterpreted the call somehow, some way. I was not intended to be a pastor. My fear was that I would end up in the ministry and that I would do a terrible job of it. And my fear was that I would be a church killer, that I would show up and church attendance would precipitously decline and people would flee and only a few would hang on afterwards and that sort of thing. And I would be moved from church to church to church, just bringing disaster everywhere I went. That was a big lie that Satan was trying to thrust down my throat right then. I was afraid I'd be a church killer. Well, experience has proven that it really that has not proven to be true. The fear that I had before I started ministry, what would I say in sermons, and was I a church killer? Neither of those fears have played out. But when I was wrestling with a call, it very nearly stopped me in my tracks. I didn't have enough faith to believe that God would really call a guy like me. That was the real bottom line. I just really didn't believe that God would call a guy like me. So there was that had a significant impact on my faith and my walk with the Lord.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Seems like there are a lot of challenges. I'm sure that a lot of different people have when they're asked to do something, whether they think that they are good enough to handle that.
And it's not just clergy; it's all folks in the church or all walks of life.
Right.
But any of us could say, "Well, I've never done that before." Mm-hmm. And so therefore I cannot do it. I don't know how to do it. Mm-hmm. Where would I begin? We're afraid of trying and failing for it, probably.
Right.
And then I think that's any walk of life. Anyone.
Right. Well, I think I said almost the same thing when producer Dean Piper called me and suggested I start a podcast. I said I wouldn't know what to say. He says, Shelby, you've lived a long life. He says, I think you have a lot to say.
Uh-huh.
And, I think you found that to be true, haven't you?
Yeah, it's proven true in your part.
So, yeah, well, I think this is number 37 or episodes.
All right.
Since the day after Christmas.
Well, way to go. Way to go.
I'm still here and we're still here. And I really thank you for helping me
Sure.
with us
It's a
too.
privilege.
So, yeah. So, fear is a basic human trait, right?
You're right. Yes.
Right, right from the beginning, we automatically, when we're faced with a serious, like a bear or
Right,
a wild animal, I mean,
right.
that fear is going to be there, and I believe that's a rational fear, right? To
Right. I
be
think that
afraid of,
for self-preservation, it is a healthy fear.
right?
We should be fearful and cautious when confronted with such a thing. We've got to protect our life. Fear can be a good thing.
Yeah, that when I lived in Tennessee, there was a woman, I believe, killed in the Smoky Mountain National Park by a bear,
Oh
and
no.
apparently there were maybe it was two different situations, but one of them, the people were out there trying to feed these baby bears or whatever,
Oh
and in
no.
one of the parks, and I thought, where when I think back on it, I think, where was their fear? Didn't they know that that was something to be afraid of? And they
Mother
maybe should,
bears are notoriously fierce about protecting their cubs.
right, right. And so sometimes um, maybe I don't know if those people were just not thinking. That must be what it was
How
because
often do we see these days about the visitors, excuse me, to Yellowstone and trying to pet the bison, the buffalo, and people getting
Mhm.
hurt, and because they think they're right there outside my car, they must be safe, they must be domesticated, and no, these are still wild animals. And time again, they say, do not get near them, do not get out of your car, do not approach them. And yet we see these videos of people doing exactly the same thing. It's exactly the opposite thing they should never
yeah,
do.
in what is it they call it? Oh, I can't think of the word right now. When you think that it's never going to happen to you,
Ah, all right. Mm-hmm.
you know, whatever. But anyway, so it said fear is an emotion that will always find a way to creep into our lives, but it's our response to that fear that defines
I
us.
see. Mm-hmm.
I think
Okay, the response. Yes,
very,
exactly.
very good.
Yeah,
Uh, and there were rational fears I was reading about
right.
and irrational fears. So I think
Right.
rational fears would be to have that some fear for some of these wild animals that are going
Right.
to, that's their
Mhm.
natural instinct.
A rational fear if I find myself standing on the edge of a tall building, I have that rational fear of falling, and I
Mhm.
want to remove myself from that risky place, and that's a rational fear.
Right. And I was reminded this morning how back when I was about probably about 15. I was not a good swimmer. I didn't know how to swim
Uh,
really back in those days.
okay.
But we were in Arkansas, and my cousins and my uncles took us to a swimming hole, which was like under a bridge.
Okay.
And the kids at my uncles all checked it out and said it was safe for them to dive off of, the whatever that comment, that cement thing that holds the bridge up is called.
The
And,
abutment. The
you know,
cement
about
abutment.
and
Yeah.
so they were all jumping off of that. I think I was a little older even. I think I might have been around 18. And they were all jumping off of that thing. And they, oh, come on, Shelby, come on, you can do it too. And I got up on there and I just stood there frozen for, I don't know, it seemed like forever. And
Yeah.
they kept I mean, to me, that was a rational fear. I had never
Yeah.
done it before. I knew I couldn't swim very well. I knew that everybody was there that probably would save me if I needed it. But that was a very paralyzing
Yeah.
fear.
Did you jump or
Yes,
did you
I
back down?
finally jumped. Yes, and
You did
everybody clapped and got me. I came up and they helped me out of the water.
jump.
Wow, she did it. She did it. And they still talk about that today sometimes. Remember time
You
we went
overcame your fear.
to jump off them.
Yeah, you overcame your fear. Well.
So there's irrational fears. Well, what would be an example, do you think, of an irrational?
Well, I think being afraid of spiders is a bit irrational, and
Oh,
there's some cautions we might take. There's some spiders that, if bitten, would make us quite
yeah.
ill and that sort of thing.
Okay.
And, I'm
Well,
not afraid of the daddy long legs. I was taught from a little boy, you never squish granddaddy long legs spider,
really?
because they are productive. They're what's the word I'm looking for? They are a positive influence on our lives, man. Maybe they eat mosquitoes. I can't remember what it was said about them, but I was always instructed, never kill a granddaddy long legs. I've never been afraid of them. Now, there's certain spiders, the black widow spider, and there's other, the recluse spider and that sort of thing. We have to be careful. I got a spider bite about 4 years ago, and it was so bad, my foot swelled up so much, it was so painful. It took months to overcome that. And somebody said, you're always supposed to knock your shoes, make sure they're empty before you put them on. Apparently the spider was in my shoe when I put it on. I thought, I don't live in the jungle. I've never done that in my entire life. I've knocked out my shoes to make sure that there's no spiders in there. I still don't do it. But I think, though, that just to see a spider and to be instantly afraid, I think that's a learned behavior. But for the most part, we don't have to be afraid of spiders, because for the most part, they're harmless to us. So that's a bit of a irrational. The people that feel that fear would say that that's a very rational fear. They would disagree with me. I'm sure of that.
Yeah. Well, what about the fear of public speaking or getting up in front of a crowd and talking?
Well, if someone has had a bad experience of getting up in front of a group of people and being frozen and unable to speak, and being humiliated because of that, having already that being their first experience of public speaking or a public appearance, that would really make it very difficult for them to try to do that again.
Is that what makes us so nervous? And
well, there's a lot of pressure. Yeah, there's more pressure because, well, we know there's a lot of people watching, so that adds to the importance of that moment. And of course, we want to do very well, and usually we don't do very well in those first moments or experiences of public speaking. It's tough to get started. It's tough to. In fact, I can remember the first time I was ever up on stage in front of someone. It was a young king and queen contest for little children in our community. And both my twin brother and I, we each had a chance to get up. The stage was a flatbed trailer. It was outside of the community hall in our little rural community. And I got up there and they were asking me questions. And I'm just looking at all the people. And I was about 5 years old. I didn't say anything. I was so scared. And then I was really, really miffed that I didn't get the crown, that I wasn't crowned king. Well, if you're not going to say anything, you're not going to impress anybody. You're not going to win any contest. So that was my first experience. It didn't go very well at all. But, over the years, I've had other experiences of having to step forward in leadership. And I think the one time that I was totally impressed about my ability to lead was my senior year in high school, and I was elected the president of the National Honor Society in the Alcona High School up in Alcona County, just south of Alpena. And I got elected the president. Just took me completely by surprise. And then we had several programs we began. We began a basketball homecoming experience, and I had to MC the crowning of the queen and that sort of thing. It turned out to be my girlfriend, and I got to crown her, and everybody said, "Kiss her, Carl, kiss her." But at the end of the year, I had to preside over award ceremonies, and I was just kind of stunned when it was all done. I was walking away from the event. I thought, look at what you just did. You really did that quite well. it took me by surprise. It took me by surprise.
Mhm. Mhm. I remember my husband took the Dale Carnegie course through General Motors where he worked. And he came home, he says, "We don't teach you how to be unafraid. We teach you to have the butterflies fly in formation."
I've heard that phrase before.
I've always heard that. You thought of that ever since. Okay,
I've heard that too. I think I admire that. I admire that. You're always going to have the butterflies, but
right.
you take the
Right.
butterflies and have them flying in formation. Yeah.
So I think maybe the fear of rejection or the fear of failure probably comes into that fear of public speaking a lot.
Yeah. Well, on a personal level, when I used to go to dances, especially when I was in the military and I had really short hair, if I went to ask a girl to dance, almost every time I was rejected. And it got so discouraged that I wouldn't go to dances. I wouldn't go to bars. I wouldn't try to pick up girls because they were looking for the long-haired college guys, and here I am, a military look, and they didn't want anything to do with me. So it was very discouraging for me. I really got gun shy. I wouldn't ask anybody because I was so sure I was going to get rejected. So why bother? So it was real. It was real for me.
I'll be darned. That's another topic for another day, maybe.
Okay, mark that one down.
So let's go on to let's see this. What was it? How does the Bible address the concept of fear, and what verses are most frequently cited?
Shelby, I'm so glad you asked that. Because I did a little research earlier today.
Okay, good for you.
The Bible is adamantly telling us that fear is bad for us. Overall, fear is bad for us, and is overwhelmingly telling us, do not fear. Overwhelmingly, there's so many verses throughout the Bible, in all the Hebrew scriptures and all the New Testament scriptures, so many verses are telling us, do not fear. I looked up the phrase "fear not." I have this program on my computer. It's called Bible Gateway, and it's a automated what's the word I'm looking for that looks up all the Bible verses. And I typed in "fear not," and the entire Bible "fear not" shows up 82 times. And then I put in "do not fear," and that shows up in the Bible 45 times. And then I typed in "be not afraid," and that shows up 97 times. And then I typed in "do not be afraid," and that shows up 81 times. Now, I didn't add those up, but we're almost to 400 times individually that we are told to not be afraid. And then I thought, on the other hand, there are many times when we are given the encouragement to experience peace. Be at peace comes up 14 times. Peace be with you comes up 22 times. And it was asking the question about what verses are most frequently cited. I'll tell you the verse that most especially changed my life, because I was so afraid that God wasn't going to love me. I didn't know about God's grace for me. And this verse that I found a long, long time ago has been a life changer and a life saver for me. And it's 1 John chapter 4, verse 18. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear. And goes on to say, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. But that first part was the most important for me. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear. To me, for me, it has been the most significant Bible verse that honestly, it changed my life, because I realized I was still afraid that God wouldn't love me, that when it came time to go to heaven, and that God would say, "Oh no, you didn't make it. You weren't good enough. You're not perfect yet." And I just didn't know and understand about God's grace. And I was so afraid all the time that I would miss the boat. And here I read this about perfect love casts out all fear. If God loves me perfectly, and to the best of my ability, I love God in return, I have nothing to fear. That God will receive this yielded heart and accept me into God's presence in the final moment. So that has been the life-changing scripture for me. And then also, this is the one that we had just a couple weeks ago in worship, Shelby. And it's the time when Jesus calms the storm. And the storms come up and the boat is sinking and the disciples wake Jesus up. This is found in Mark chapter 4, verses 35 to 41. The boat is sinking and the disciples come and say to Jesus, don't you care that we're about ready to die? And Jesus gets up and rebukes the wind. This is verse 39, and says to the waves, quiet, be still. And the wind died down and it was completely calm. And then Jesus said to his disciples, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? So there's the way the scriptures address it, that fear is the absence of faith in a way. Or the opposite of that is that when we have faith, the faith conquers fear. Faith conquers fear. So this is, to me, the most significant passages that speak about handling fear in our life, how faith helps us to and delivers us from the experience of fear. So that's what I came up with when I took a look at that question this morning. I think the Bible is saying overwhelmingly that we are called to leave fear behind and live by faith. So,
was it yesterday or last week that, let's see, there's something forming in my head here, but that's, yeah, that you talked about
faith conquers fear.
No, something, there was a chance you had to help somebody.
Oh, there's the little boy.
It would have been, it wasn't a courageous time at that time, but then the next morning you felt sometimes you have to be courageous to do the right thing. I think that's what you said.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to choose to be courageous, step up. You got to, and most of the time it's not, it's not this so much. If I do this, I could be physically harmed, but so much of the time we're worried about what will people think. If I choose to do the right thing, what will people say? Will they criticize me for stepping out or putting myself forward or taking a risk? And sometimes we don't even know what people would say or think or how they'd react. We just fear that they would say, think, or react negatively, critically against us. And that fear about how people might react and what they might say holds us back from doing good things, so yeah, absolutely.
But sometimes doing that good thing is what God wants us to do.
I think so. I really believe you're right.
Yeah, I have a friend who would really like to meet someone, maybe fall in love, maybe just have a friend to do things with, a male friend. And I've suggested, I met Rec online, internet dating. Oh, don't talk to me about that. There's, always the stuff on TV warning you about someone getting killed because vices. Yeah, but I could teach you safe way of doing it.
There is a safe way of
doing it. That you have to have certain rules that you're going to follow. You have to if you're going to meet somebody strange for the first time, you're going to meet them in a public place where there's lots of people around, and you're not going to go out with them alone.
Right. You're not going to leave your car and get in their car vehicle to go someplace all by yourself.
Right.
Not at first.
a friend of mine said, well, yeah, we met in the park. I said, where? I mean, in the park? The first time? No, that's not what you do. Maybe you meet for a cup of coffee in a public restaurant or
Right.
somewhere where there's a lot
Right.
of people around.
Right. But
But
apart
anyway,
from it, can
that's
be too
a whole
isolated.
other story. But yeah, she's so afraid of doing that it keeps.
I have a question for you, Shelby. Would you recommend for that first meeting time, especially the woman brings a woman friend with her to so the two of them, you're meeting this man you've never met before, with you have a friend that's with you for that particular meeting. Is that something you'd recommend or choose to do?
Well, of all the time, I had a lot of first dates. I have to say that.
All right.
And
All right. All
we
right.
had one that I took a friend with me.
Okay.
And
Okay. So you did.
that didn't turn out so well because they spent more time talking.
Oh, say, can you see? Okay. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
And I was a little bit left out of the conversation.
Oh, well,
But on
maybe.
the other hand, she found out a whole lot of other things about him that he hadn't told me that made a difference. So there was never a second date with him.
I see.
Period.
I see. So you
Yeah.
were kind of saved from a bad situation in a
Mhm.
couple of different ways and a couple of
Mhm.
different moments.
Right.
Yeah,
But I always advocated you meet in a public place. I
I
don't
would say so.
yeah, a
Yeah,
coffee shop, um, um,
food mall at
restaurant, and it doesn't have to be a whole meal. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. I made myself think I'm going to have fun on this first date, no matter whether I think I'm interested in him or not. After a short time, I'm going to make it a memorable, fun date for both of us. Period.
good.
And that's what I
That's a
did.
good approach.
But here's the thing. I always met them at a restaurant. One exception, I met them in Barnes and Noble, and they had nice chairs there, a little back there in Kalamazoo. Yeah,
Right.
we sat
Yeah,
back
they
there
did
and chatted, and then we
reading
went
that
over to the
season.
coffee chat part, and continued there.
Yeah.
So that is a very important. It's got to be in a public place, and you don't get in their car. They don't get in your car until you're
Yeah.
a lot more familiar with them. Also,
Yeah.
leave in your note, get your family a note for them telling all the information that where you're going, what time you're going to be there, how long you're going to be there, what his full name is, first and last
Contact information. Mm-hmm.
car, color of car or make of car if you can. I even got not driver's license, but the car license on one.
Okay.
And the guy wanted to know why. And I just said, well, in case I disappear, they got someplace. He says, well, you tell me what the car license tag says on your car. I said, okay, good for you. You get as much
Fair enough.
information. You
Fair
leave
enough.
it. And
Yeah,
you leave
but
it somewhere they can find it in case you don't return.
right,
But
right. That
there
is
was one guy I was very, I just did not want him to walk me to my car. I just had a feeling. So I asked someone I just said no thanks. You go ahead and get in your car. I'll be okay. But of course I always met him in the daytime. It was never after dark.
right.
We always
I
met
see.
for lunch or before dark.
Mhm.
And there's quite a few different rules, that you really have to watch out for. But yeah,
Hey,
I
because you were-
really feel bad that she's so afraid that she won't even try it. And
yeah. But I would
so,
say your rules are keeping you safe. And
mhm,
so because you have those rules and you're careful and cautious in that regard, that you do not have anything to fear.
right.
And so you
Well,
can make that decision. I'm going to enjoy myself here. I'm out on an adventure of discovery.
right.
And I'm going to make the best of this. And I think that I still can enjoy this time.
And I can honestly say I enjoyed every single first date I had.
That's nice. That's good.
And it
Doing
was a
it
lot.
the right way. I'm sure of that.
Yeah. And most of them wanted a second date, and some got it and some didn't. So, well, we're getting off track here a little bit. Let's see, I've kind of lost my questions. What is that next one that?
Well, let's see. How can I'd marked, let's see, there's
I think we're
question
on 9.
number 9. Are there specific biblical characters who struggled with fear? And how
Yeah,
did they overcome it?
right.
And I chose Elijah. Elijah was in trouble for the king of the northern kingdom of Israel. His name was Ahab, King Ahab, and his wife was the wicked queen Jezebel. One of the names of out of the Hebrew scriptures, I think many of us would recognize. And King Ahab and Queen Jezebel were doing horrible things as far as treatment of the people faithful to God. And they were following the religions of the original religions of the land, and had the priests of Baal that were leading worship in the capital city and the worship places in the capital city of Samaria. They were really turning away from God. And so Elijah came to King Ahab and said, because you're being unfaithful, God says that there will be no rain until I say it again. And so for 3.5 years, there was no rain. And there were terrible drought. And so many of the animals, so many of the cattle and horses and other beasts of burden had died because there was no food or water for them. It was a terrible time of suffering. And then God indicated after 3.5 years, now's the time. And so there was a great showdown on one of the mountains in northern Israel. And Elijah said to all of the prophets of Baal, you set up an altar and you set up the stones for the altar. You set up the wood on the altar. You cut up a bowl of sacrifice, but you can't put any fire to it. Then you dance and you pray and you cry out and do whatever you need to do. And if Baal is the real living God, Baal will send fire to light your sacrifice. And they cried out and they prayed and they danced and they gashed themselves with knives and they did everything they could until they were exhausted half the day, all the morning long. And then Elijah sets up his own separate altar and sets wood on the altar and sets the bowl on the altar and then calls for tons of water to be poured onto this. And like it could never be lit up because it's so soaked with water. And then Elijah says, just a quiet prayer, God, I know you're God. I know you're here. So just prove who you are. And fire fell from heaven, and the sacrifice and the wood and even the stones, everything was consumed by the fire that fell from heaven. So there's a great victory for God. And Jezebel threatens Ahab, and all of the prophets of Baal were slaughtered following that. And Jezebel said, as the prophets of Baal have died, so you are going to be dead tomorrow. Well, now Elijah is full of fear and he runs away. And after 40 days, he ends up in Mount Sinai, and he's hiding in a cave. And God comes to him and talks to him and says, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? And Elijah finally confesses that I'm so afraid. They're after me right now. I'm the only one that's left. I'm all alone, and there's no one else faithful to you. And God says, hey, here's your marching orders. You got to anoint your successor. You got to anoint a new king over Northern Kingdom, and all of these other things. And he says, and I have reserved 7,000 who have never worshiped Baal. They are 7,000 in all of Israel that are still faithful to me. You are not alone. You are not alone. And so no longer was Elijah afraid of Queen Jezebel. No longer was he afraid of being captured and killed. God has given him the confidence. And I think maybe and especially God gave him confidence by saying there's 7,000 others who are like you and have not worshiped and have not abandoned their faith. And I think that alone reinforced Elijah's determination to get back into the swing of the ministry that he was called to do. There are times when faithful people do get discouraged. There's times that we think everything's falling apart. There's times we think, how are we ever going to get out of this? We look at this earthly circumstances around us and we think there's no heavenly way we can get through it. And then God says, oh yeah, watch this. I think God acts when we're discouraged. God acts to show that God is still in control. To me, that is out of question 9. There are specific biblical characters who struggle with fear. Elijah is just a great example, but there are many others who were called and they thought, I could never do that. King Saul, when he was called, he thought, oh, I'm not anybody, I'm not nobody called to be king. And yet King Saul was able to serve and to start the reign of kings in the land of Israel. There are many of the judges in that Old Testament book that they were called and they felt that they were unqualified. How could I be a leader? And yet God empowered them to do what was necessary. The initial call, I think, is most often felt with, gosh, I couldn't do that. Why are you calling me? I'm afraid. So really, we come out, our calling hits us and puts us in a place of fear and brings us out, hopefully prayerfully, into a place of confidence.
I like what you said in the very beginning today about when you were trembling with a nightmare or whatever, and all you could get out was Jesus. Jesus.
Just the name.
Yeah. Have you got any other suggestions for prayers or meditation that can help us to overcome fear?
I like repetition types of prayers. There are times when, for me, I'm plagued by Satan coming up and reminding me of when I was particularly stupid, when I was particularly mistaken, when I really made an idiot of myself, or I misspoke myself, or was humiliated because of what I had done, and did it. So people knew that I'd done such an awful thing. I know I've been forgiven of that a long, long time ago. But Satan every once in a while comes around and says, hey, you idiot, do you remember when? And there's a story I can take you back to my kindergarten days. Where I look back and I think, why did I do such an idiotic thing? When Satan reminds me of those things, all I need to do is pray this little prayer, Jesus, help me. Jesus, help me. Because what Satan's trying to do is get me to regret and to despair and to be embarrassed all over again. And I know Jesus has already forgiven me. So I know that all I have to do is remind myself, Jesus, save me. Jesus, help me. And that reminder has gone away. I'll be honest with you. Anybody who's listening, Shelby, with you and anybody who's listening, I'll do that a dozen times a day. Jesus, help me. Jesus, help me. Sometimes it's for the things I did foolishly in the past. Sometimes it's like, what am I going to do in this next moment? Jesus, help me. Jesus, help. Yeah, I think those little prayers are probably the most effective ones. Probably the ones we say the most often.
Like this, you reminded me once in a church in Arkansas I was visiting, and they wanted to go around asking everybody what a memorable Bible verse was or something.
Okay.
And someone came up with Jesus saves.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
The shortest sentence in the Bible.
it's Jesus wept.
Wept? Is that the one? Okay. Jesus wept.
Jesus wept. It was the death of Lazarus. The death of Lazarus when everyone else was mourning. Jesus wept. Yeah.
We're almost out of time, but I was talking to another fellow that's going to be, I'm going to interview him in a couple of weeks. And he was talking about different, being in a conference where there was I think at least one person from every religion that is of practice today.
Okay.
And because I had asked him, well, I had heard that, well, never, I don't want to get into that. But I had, oh golly, I lost my train of thought.
He's going to this conference with all these other faiths.
What's the main difference between Christianity and Mohammed? Those who believe in Mohammed
or Buddhism,
Buddhist, or in it. What is the defining characteristic of a Christian? And do you know what he said to me?
I'd be interested to hear. What?
Grace.
Oh. Yeah.
Christianity is the only one that has grace.
Yeah.
The others, you're going to get into heaven by your acts and not by grace. So I
like what he's saying. I believe he's right. I was curious what he'd say, and haven't heard it. I said, yeah, he's right.
Yeah. Well, good. That's good to know. And may the grace of God go with all of you during your week and with us, and bring us on to the next good thing that's going to happen to us in our lives. How about that?
Thanks, Shelby.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here.
Hey.
And I remind everybody, let's see, I think, this one will be shown on a week from tomorrow. So September the 5th. So, well, I can't believe we're in a new month. We'll be in a new month in a few days. Can you? I mean, I'm still back in January, I think. Well, at least June. It's summer, right? So anyway, I will see all of you tomorrow. Well, yeah, next Tuesday. Thanks a lot for coming. Bye now. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.